This lecture is not simply about toxic relationships. It is about something far more uncomfortable. It is about the hidden psychological structures that make human beings hurt the people they claim to love the most. And perhaps even more disturbing, why we continue returning to the very relationships that destroy us. Many people spend years asking the wrong question. Why are they doing this to me? Why does the person closest to me hurt me the most? Why can't I walk away? But psychology teaches us something that most people resist hearing. The problem is often not the person. The problem is the structure. And once you understand that, human relationships begin to look completely different. The illusion of love. There is an ancient idea found in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It suggests that human beings rarely see reality as it truly is. Instead, we see a world reconstructed through fear, attachment, insecurity, and desire. Most people think this philosophy is about death. It is not. It is about everyday life, especially relationships, because the closer someone becomes to us, the more psychological projection enters the relationship. At first, relationships feel simple. Love becomes attachment. Attachment becomes expectation. Expectation becomes control. And slowly, without realizing it, the relationship changes form. Love turns into possession. Understanding turns into interpretation. Trust turns into suspicion. And then one day, people wake up emotionally exhausted, asking, "What happened to us?" But psychologically speaking, the collapse did not happen suddenly. The structure was quietly changing the entire time. Why familiar pain feels safer than freedom. One of the darkest truths about human psychology is this: people do not always choose happiness. Very often they choose familiarity, even familiar suffering. This is why people remain in relationships that repeatedly damage them. They fight constantly. They feel emotionally drained. They lose confidence, energy, and clarity. Yet they stay. Why? Because the human nervous system becomes attached not only to love, but also to emotional intensity. Conflict itself can become addictive. Chaos can begin to feel like intimacy, and silence can start to feel frightening. This is why some people panic when relationships become peaceful. Without emotional turbulence, they suddenly feel empty. Psychologists sometimes describe this as trauma bonding, emotional dependency, or repetition compulsion. But at its core, it is this: the mind mistakes emotional familiarity for emotional safety. That is why intelligent people repeatedly return to destructive relationships, while fully understanding the damage being done. Knowledge alone does not break emotional structures. Awareness must become strategy, the hidden structure of repetition. Many people believe their suffering is random. It is not. Human beings unconsciously recreate familiar emotional environments. That means if someone grows accustomed to guilt, instability, criticism, jealousy, or emotional unpredictability, they may unknowingly continue selecting relationships that reproduce those same emotional patterns. Different faces, same structure, different relationship, same ending. This is why some people feel trapped in a cycle, because they are not merely choosing people. They are repeating psychological systems. And unless the structure changes, the outcome rarely changes. Why some people become more hostile as you grow. Now we arrive at another uncomfortable truth. As you begin improving your life, certain relationships become unstable. Not because you attacked anyone, but because growth disrupts emotional equilibrium. When one person changes, the structure surrounding them changes too. And many people unconsciously resist that change. This is why jealousy is rarely about hatred alone. Jealousy is often psychological instability triggered by comparison. Your growth becomes evidence of another person's stagnation. Your discipline reminds them of their inconsistency. Your momentum exposes their passivity. Your transformation threatens the emotional balance they depended on. And that is why some people become colder the moment you begin rising. Not because you failed them, but because your growth altered the structure of the relationship. Growth is not about motivation, it is about structure. Most self-help culture teaches people to rely on motivation. Psychology teaches something far more practical. Environment shapes behavior more powerfully than intention. A person surrounded by criticism, comparison, and emotional negativity will eventually slow down, psychologically, even if they are talented. Meanwhile, a person inside a growth-oriented environment accelerates naturally. The difference is structural. This is why high performers become extremely selective about their environments. They understand a dangerous truth. Human beings rarely defeat their environment for long. If the structure constantly drains your emotional energy, eventually even strong people collapse. That is why successful individuals often appear distant. They are not necessarily cold. They are protecting cognitive bandwidth, the power of invisible growth. There is another pattern repeatedly seen among highly successful people. They grow quietly. Most people announce goals too early. They broadcast plans, dreams, ambitions, and future success before building real results. But psychologically, premature exposure creates vulnerability. It invites unnecessary opinions, comparison, jealousy, energy leakage. The strongest growth often happens invisibly. Quiet preparation, private discipline, public results. This creates what we might call a silent growth structure. And history repeatedly shows the same pattern. The people who explain the least often achieve the most. The psychology of selective distance. One of the most difficult lessons in adulthood is accepting this. Not everyone can come with you. Many people destroy themselves trying to maintain relationships that continuously sabotage their emotional stability. But maturity requires discernment. You must eventually ask, who consistently strengthens my clarity? Who repeatedly drains it? Because relationships are not merely emotional experiences. They are energetic systems. Some relationships sharpen focus. Others consume it. And emotionally intelligent people eventually stop asking, who likes me? Instead, they ask, which relationships produce peace, growth, and psychological stability? That question changes everything. The most dangerous addiction is emotional reaction. Many people think strength means dominance. It does not. Real psychological strength is becoming difficult to destabilize because emotionally reactive people surrender control constantly. Every criticism changes them. Every rejection controls them. Every conflict consumes them. But emotionally structured individuals operate differently. They do not react impulsively. They observe patterns. They create systems. They build routines strong enough to survive temporary emotions. This is why discipline matters psychologically. Routine reduces emotional chaos. Standards reduce decision fatigue. Structure protects identity. And eventually, emotional stability becomes a competitive advantage. The final shift from reaction to design. At the center of this entire lecture is one transformational idea. Stop living by reaction. Start living by design. Most people spend their lives emotionally, responding to circumstances, relationships, criticism, insecurity, and external validation. But psychologically resilient individuals build internal structures first. They choose environments intentionally. They regulate emotional exposure. They protect focus. They distance themselves from chronic chaos. And most importantly, they stop explaining themselves to everyone. Because mature growth no longer seeks permission. It seeks alignment, the hardest truth of all. Now we arrive at the final truth. The obstacles in your life may never fully disappear. Jealousy will still exist. Manipulation will still exist. Emotional dependency will still exist. But your relationship to those forces can change completely. You can evolve from a reactive person into a strategic person, a fragile person into a stable person, a constantly wounded person into someone psychologically difficult to control. And that transformation begins the moment you stop asking, why are people hurting me? And begin asking, what structure keeps repeating this pain? Because once you identify the structure, you can finally break it. Ladies and gentlemen, understanding is only the beginning. Insight without execution changes nothing. So the real question is no longer whether toxic emotional structures exist. The real question is this: will you continue living inside the same psychological loop, or will you finally redesign the structure of your life? Because in the end, the greatest form of power is not controlling others. It is becoming impossible to control through emotional chaos. And if this lecture helped you see your relationships differently, share it with someone who may still be trapped inside a cycle they do not yet understand. Sometimes one new perspective can change the entire architecture of a person's life.